I used to love camping more than anything. Nothing fancy. No national parks or cross-country trips. Just backwoods spots in my state, usually no more than a couple hours from home. I didn't go for the views or social media or any of that. It was just quiet. A way to feel like I was somewhere far away even when I wasn't. No noise, no lights, no people. That was the part one liked most, no people. This happened to me in 2019. I think about it more than I should. I don't talk about it often, but when I do, it's always the same. People listen quietly, then laugh or try to rationalize it away. I get it. I probably would have done the same thing before it happened. But when you're out there alone and things start to go wrong, and not in a storm or broken ankle kind of way, but wrong in a human way, you remember everything. You don't forget. It started simple. I had a long weekend coming up and didn't want to sit around in the house. I was living alone at the time, no girlfriend, no roommates, and I needed a reset. I picked a small area on the eastern side of the state, roughly a 3-hour drive, mostly back roads. There was a Forest Service road that ran up into the hills for a few miles, and I knew from some old maps that there were some dispersed camping spots off the main gravel strip. No services, no traffic, no cell signal, perfect. I left around noon on a Friday. My truck was loaded with the usual stuff: tent, sleeping bag, jet boil, freeze-dried meals, first aid, knife, headlamp, map, compass, backup battery, extra socks, tarp, fire starter. The whole thing was planned out. I even had a handwritten itinerary I left with my brother, just in case. I parked around 4 p.m. at this tiny pull-off, maybe big enough for 2 cars. Nobody else was there. The sun was still high, and I figured I had a couple good hours of daylight. My plan was to hike in about 3 miles, set up near a small creek I'd seen on a topo map, and spend the weekend just existing. No plans, no hikes, just sitting, maybe reading, maybe nothing at all. I should mention I'd done this same general area once before, years earlier, and hadn't seen a soul. The hike in was quiet. Not silent, but the kind of quiet where you can hear your pack creak with each step. Trees close in tight, tall pines mixed with thick underbrush. The trail was more like an animal track. Uneven, leaf-covered, roots everywhere, but I followed it with no trouble. About a mile in, I passed what looked like an old fire ring, mostly buried in leaves and moss. Nothing recent. Good sign. Another half-mile, I saw a rusted beer can wedged in a log. Older than me. No footprints, no trash. Still good. By the time I reached the spot I'd marked, the light was starting to change. You could see that yellow-orange haze in the sky, soft light that makes everything feel distant and still. I found the creek without trouble. It was narrow, shallow, no more than a few feet across, but it had clear, moving water and a flat patch of land nearby. I set up quickly. Tent, tarp, food hung high in a tree away from camp. No fire. I didn't need one and didn't want the smoke. I boiled water, ate a pouch of chicken and rice, then brushed my teeth and crawled into the tent. Everything zipped, gear stowed, headlamp within reach. The woods were cooling fast, and I lay there listening to the chirping bugs, the soft water trickle, the occasional rustle of a branch. Felt peaceful. That's the thing I remember the most about that first night. Felt right. Nothing out of place. But the second night didn't. The second day, I stayed near camp. I wandered maybe a quarter mile in either direction, collecting sticks, watching ants crawl over mossy rocks, just letting my brain idle. Around 4 p.m., I was sitting by the water when I saw something float past. It was pale and long and caught on a branch. I pulled it out and saw it was a sock. A thick wool sock, white with gray heel and toe. Looked like the kind sold in outdoor stores. I looked it over. It was wet and smelled like mud. Not old or rotted, but definitely used. I don't know why it unsettled me, but it did. Not because people don't lose things out there. They do. But this sock was upstream, not down, and there hadn't been any signs of recent traffic. Still, I shrugged it off, left it on a rock to dry, and went back to camp. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. There wasn't any sound, and that's what bugged me. Total stillness. Not just quiet, dead quiet. No bugs, no frogs, no water trickle. Just air. Like the whole forest was holding its breath. Sometime in the night, I heard footsteps, not animals. I know the difference. I've heard deer pick their way over dry leaves. I've heard raccoons pawing around for scraps. These were slow, heavy, two-footed, human. They didn't come close. They never even reached my tent. But they circled, wide, deliberate loops. First maybe 40 feet out, then closer, then back, then farther. Always just out of sight. I couldn't see anything, even with the headlamp. I didn't move. I stayed zipped in, knife clutched to my chest, waiting. It lasted hours. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, it was light out and nothing looked touched. No tracks, no damage. My food bag was still hanging. My gear was fine. The sock was gone. I packed up fast. I didn't eat. I didn't boil water. I didn't take photos. I loaded everything and took off, cutting a new path north that would loop me back to the service road. Even if it added miles. I didn't care. I just wanted out. The whole way I had this feeling. You know when you're being watched? Like a heat on the back of your neck that doesn't go away? It never left me. Every few minutes I'd stop and listen. Nothing. No crackle, no shuffle, no voice. Just the same stillness. I saw a couple more signs that someone had been out there. Another sock, stuck high in a tree like someone had tossed it. A dented metal thermos half buried under leaves. I didn't touch any of it. I didn't stop moving. I reached the gravel lot by late afternoon. My truck was still there, alone. But something had changed. The driver's side door was slightly open, not wide, just enough that the dome light must have drained the battery. Sure enough, when I turned the key, nothing happened. Dead. My truck, which I had triple-checked and locked before heading out, was dead, door ajar. I looked around. Still no other vehicles. No tire tracks. Just that creeping silence. I stood there, keys in hand, heart hammering. I couldn't figure it out. How had someone found the truck? Why leave it like that? If it was theft, why not take anything? I had tools, gear, a GPS unit in the glove box. Everything was still there, except for my registration. That paper was gone. I didn't stay. I grabbed my bag and started walking. I knew the road ran about 6 miles downhill before it hit a highway. It was getting dark, but I wasn't stopping. I walked the whole way, fast, not looking back. Every time I passed a turnout or another trailhead, I felt eyes on me. Finally, I reached the main road, flagged down a pickup, got a ride into town, and called a tow truck. I didn't tell the driver much, just that the battery was dead, and I didn't want to spend the night out there alone. He gave me a look but didn't ask questions. Back home, I changed all the locks on my doors, got a dash cam, bought a motion sensor for the back door. For a while, I jumped at everything. A door slam, a footstep, a branch tapping the window. Couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. That feeling stuck with me. Weeks later, I got a letter. No return address. Just a plain envelope with my name and address, handwritten. Inside was a single photograph. It was me setting up my tent near the creek. Taken from far away, probably with a zoom lens. No note, no explanation. Just that. That's when I moved. New state, new number, no more camping. I never saw anything again, but I still wonder about that second night. The footsteps, the sock, the dead battery. I think whoever it was, they'd done it before. I think they live out there or come back often. And I think they watch people. Just watch. I was lucky. I think that all the time. I was lucky that whoever it was didn't want more. Or maybe they were just waiting for something I didn't give them. Either way, I never went back. I can't. Because no matter where I camped now, no matter how far I drove or how remote it was, I'd still hear those footsteps, just beyond the tent, just far enough to keep me guessing. And I don't think I could do that again, not even once. I had been meaning to take a trip for a while, not a big one, just a short solo camping trip to get away from the noise. I live in a small city, and life gets heavy sometimes. Constant sounds, people, traffic, lights. I needed a break. I wanted to sit in the woods and listen to wind moving through trees, to hear water, maybe see a few deer. I packed light, a tent, a sleeping bag, my knife, some food, a flashlight, and a small burner for cooking. I brought firewood in my truck because I didn't want to deal with wet wood or the trouble of finding good stuff on the ground. I had a place in mind already, an area about 2 hours north that I had found last year. Not a marked campsite, just a clearing near a river bend where the water slows down and makes a little pool. The drive was uneventful, mostly empty highway and then gravel road. The air smelled like pine when I got out of the truck. There were no other vehicles around. That was perfect. That was what I wanted. I set up camp quickly. The tent was up in 15 minutes. I laid the firewood in a small ring of rocks left behind from someone else's fire, probably months ago. It was a quiet spot. No wind, no bugs. That first night, everything felt exactly how I wanted. I made rice and beans on the burner, watched the fire for a while, and then climbed into the tent to read by flashlight. I slept early and hard. The next day was more of the same. I sat by the water and watched dragonflies skim across the surface. I didn't see anyone, didn't hear anything strange. I made lunch, just a sandwich, and then walked up the river for maybe a mile. Saw bear tracks, but they were old. Saw what looked like deer sleeping spots in the grass. I felt calm. It was one of the most peaceful days I'd had in months. That night, I built a larger fire. It was cool out and I wanted the extra warmth. I sat for a long time just staring into it. Something about the flames keeps your brain busy while your body rests. I kept the fire going until around 11, then let it burn down naturally and crawled into the tent again. I left the rain flap open to get more air in the tent, just using the mesh. I could see the last red glow of the fire through it. I don't know what time I woke up, but it was still dark. The fire was out. The forest was still, but something felt different. I had that feeling you get when someone is standing over your bed, that deep sense of being watched. I didn't move at first. I listened. My heart started to beat faster, and I didn't hear anything for a long time, just my own breathing. Then I heard it, crunch, like someone stepping slowly on dry ground. Not a branch snap or a squirrel jump. It was a boot on dead leaves. Then another, slow, deliberate, not an animal. Someone was walking near my tent. I stayed frozen. I barely breathed. I reached slowly for my knife, which I always keep inside the tent next to my sleeping bag. I felt the handle and gripped it, holding it tight under the sleeping bag. I didn't move otherwise. The steps didn't come any closer. They stopped after 4 or 5 paces. I listened for what felt like forever, but there was nothing else. Eventually, I talked myself out of being scared. Could have been a deer. I could have imagined it. Maybe I was half asleep. I told myself anything I could to keep my heart from racing. I didn't sleep again, though. I just laid there waiting for the sun. When it came up, I got out of the tent right away and looked around. No one was there. No signs of anything strange. I walked the perimeter of my camp. No footprints. Nothing disturbed. I looked around the trees nearby and didn't see any sign of another person. I even walked down the trail I had come in on, maybe 50 yards or so, just to be sure. Still nothing. I felt like maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the woods were just playing tricks on me. That third day, I still stayed close to camp. I didn't wander far. I kept my knife in my hand when I walked, which I never do. I kept turning around, scanning the trees behind me more than in front. I didn't feel the same peace I had the day before. The air felt different, tighter, like someone was waiting for me to leave. That night, I didn't light a big fire. I made it small and low, not for warmth but to cook with. I turned it out early and climbed into the tent before full dark. I zipped everything closed. No flap open this time. Just me inside a thin layer of nylon and a blade. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Then it happened again. This time it wasn't just footsteps. It was the sound of someone breathing. Close. I could hear slow, calm breathing right outside my tent wall. Not fast like someone running. Not panicked. Calm. Controlled. Careful. I couldn't tell where exactly it was coming from. Felt like it was all around the tent. Like someone was crouched low, just out of view. Waiting. I held my knife and didn't move. I was sweating. My sleeping bag was damp from it. I wanted to scream but didn't. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to let whoever was out there know I was awake. The breathing lasted maybe a minute. Then it stopped. I didn't hear footsteps this time. No movement, just silence again. I stayed frozen until the sun came up. When it finally did, I packed up camp immediately. I rolled my tent up in a messy bundle and threw it in the truck bed. I didn't eat, didn't drink anything, just got out of there. The road was still empty. I drove too fast on the gravel and didn't care about the dust cloud behind me. I made it home by late morning and sat in my apartment, blinds drawn, door locked. I kept going over everything in my head. I didn't see anyone, didn't hear them talk, but I knew it wasn't in my head. That second night, the breathing was real. You don't imagine breathing like that. You don't hear that unless someone is really close. I even stood outside my own tent at home and tried to recreate it. You had to be inches away to hear it that clearly. Inches. I didn't call the police. I didn't know what I'd say. Someone breathed near my tent. Isn't exactly an emergency report. I didn't tell any of my friends either. I just tried to forget it. A few weeks passed. I didn't camp again. I didn't even go hiking. I stayed in, kept the door locked, and jumped whenever the floor creaked. Then one night, I was watching the local news and saw a story that made me freeze. There had been an arrest up north. A man caught breaking into a hunting cabin, armed, suspected in several disappearances from the area over the past year. He wasn't from the region. He had no fixed address, no ID, just a name he gave and some old camping gear. The police believed he had been living in the woods, moving around campsites and back roads. They showed a picture of him. It wasn't a great one, just a mugshot, but I felt a deep, sick pull in my stomach when I saw it. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place why. I knew I hadn't met him, but something about his face was familiar in the way a shadow is familiar. Like I'd seen it once, maybe in a dream. I didn't jump up and say, "That's him." I didn't call in and report anything, because I wasn't sure. I had never seen him, not really, but I knew. That feeling in the tent, that calm, slow breathing, that wasn't the sound of someone unsure. That was someone who had done it before, someone who had gotten close before. I think he was testing me, seeing if I'd scream, if I'd run out, seeing if I was easy. I don't know why he didn't come in. Maybe I was too alert. Maybe he didn't like something about my camp. Or maybe he just liked the waiting. The cops said he had a habit of picking isolated camps, that he liked watching people before making his move, that some of the people he targeted hadn't even known he was there until it was too late. I think about that a lot. How close he must have been. How long he might have been watching me, even before I heard him. That second night, with the breathing, I think he was right next to my head. That trip ruined camping for me. I haven't gone back since. I want to say that maybe one day I'll try again, but I don't believe that. Not really, because when you've heard someone breathe right outside your tent, slow and calm like they're waiting for something, you can't unhear it. You can't sleep the same way after that. You carry it with you, and sometimes, when I'm lying in bed with the lights off and the window cracked open, I hear the wind move through the trees outside and wonder if he's still out there, watching someone else now, waiting. I had been planning that trip for months, just a few days off the grid, nothing major. The idea was simple: drive out to the national forest, hike in about 6 or 7 miles, and camp by myself for 3 nights. No phone, no people, no traffic, no noise, just quiet. I'd done solo hikes before, nothing extreme, but enough to know how to handle myself. I brought the basics: tent, sleeping bag, food, water, small stove, knife, flashlight, backup batteries, a fire starter kit, first aid, the works. I wasn't roughing it entirely, but I wasn't doing the glamping thing either. It was real camping, no campground, no bathrooms, no marked trail beyond the first mile. I parked at a small lot that only fit maybe 4 or 5 cars. There were 2 already there when I pulled in, but I didn't see anyone around. I locked up, slung my pack over my shoulders, and started the hike in. It was mid-October, cool enough that the bugs were gone, but not cold enough to freeze overnight. The leaves were turning, bright reds and yellows, and crunching under my boots as I walked. The first 3 miles were easy, then the trail faded into deer tracks and soft hills. I followed my GPS marker to a spot I had picked on satellite view, a flat piece of land near a small lake. Took me just under 3 hours to reach it. When I got there, the spot looked even better than it did on the map. It was tucked back from the water by about 50 feet, with just enough clearing for my tent and a fire ring. Someone else had camped there before. There was an old ring of blackened rocks and a few branches broken off nearby trees, probably for firewood. I set up quickly, put my tent near the tree line, and laid out my sleeping bag and gear inside. The first day was uneventful. I boiled some instant noodles on my camp stove, drank from my filtered water bottle, and watched the sun go down behind the trees. I built a small fire, not too big, just enough to give off some light and warmth, and sat on a log I dragged over, listening to the wind and the occasional bird or squirrel. It was peaceful. I went to bed early, slept hard, and woke up feeling rested. I spent the next day walking the perimeter of the lake, taking pictures, and jotting notes in a little book I carried. I saw a beaver dam, some old scat, probably from deer or coyote, but no people. It was exactly what I had come for. The second night, after dinner, I built a bigger fire. I used some of the old wood left behind and mixed in some of the dry branches I had gathered. The fire popped and hissed a little, but it burned hot and clean. I sat back again, warming my hands and staring into the flames. Something about sitting beside a fire by yourself, it makes time stretch out. You start thinking about stuff you haven't thought about in years. Things get quiet in your head. You start noticing the little sounds in the dark. A breeze, a crack of wood settling, an owl. Then I noticed something else. Movement. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. I heard something in the woods, a good 40 or 50 feet behind my tent. Not a twig snap or some animal scrambling through brush. It was rhythmic, steady, like footsteps. I froze, listened harder. It was hard to hear over the fire at first, but it got louder. Someone or something was walking slowly through the trees. I stood up. My knife was in my tent, so I just grabbed a heavy branch from the woodpile and held it at my side. I moved toward the sound a few steps, just past the edge of the firelight, and waited. But the sound stopped. Total silence. I held still for maybe 2 minutes, my ears straining in every direction. Nothing. Eventually, I went back to the fire. I tossed another log on and sat down, but I didn't feel relaxed anymore. I kept glancing over my shoulder and checking the tree line. That's when I saw him, a man standing maybe 15 feet away, just inside the shadows beyond the firelight. I hadn't heard him approach. He wasn't moving, just standing there watching me. My heart started pounding. I didn't say anything, didn't move either. I just stared at him. He was tall, wearing dark clothes. I couldn't see his face clearly in the flickering firelight, but his posture was strange. Not aggressive, just still, calm. After a few moments, he sat down on a rock near the edge of the fire. Still no words, no motion, just sat. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen, still gripping the stick. My mouth felt dry. My skin was hot, even though the night was cool. I wanted to say something, maybe ask him what he was doing out here, but I couldn't get anything out. My throat wouldn't work. He didn't get closer, just sat there, arms resting on his knees, eyes locked on the flames. After what felt like forever, I finally turned and walked back toward my tent. I backed away slow, not turning my back on him. Once I was inside, I zipped it shut and sat with my knife in my hand, staring at the thin nylon wall between me and whoever that was. Eventually, I peeked out. The man was gone. I didn't sleep much that night. When the sun came up, I stepped out slowly and looked around. There was no sign of him, no footprints in the soft dirt, nothing left behind. The fire had burned out, but the coals were still warm. I packed up my things fast. I didn't care that I had another night planned. Something about that guy didn't sit right. I hiked out fast, barely stopping for water, and got back to my truck by mid-afternoon. I didn't see a single other person on the trail. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone about it. It felt too strange, too unreal, like maybe I had imagined it. But I knew I hadn't. A few months went by. Winter came and went. I didn't camp again. Then I was browsing a hiking forum I liked. Mostly gear reviews, trail reports, that sort of thing, and I came across a post titled, "Weird Guy in the Woods. Anyone else see this?" I clicked it. The poster said they had been camping alone in a forest area about 50 miles from where I had gone. They described something almost identical. Sitting by a fire, a man appearing out of nowhere, standing at the edge of the trees, then silently sitting near the fire without saying anything. But the part that made my stomach drop was near the end. They wrote, "The scariest part was when he finally spoke. He looked into the fire and said, 'You were sitting right there last time, remember?' Then laughed like it was a private joke. But I'd never met him before in my life. I got out the next morning. I stared at the screen, heart racing. I read that sentence over and over again. 'You were sitting right there last time, remember?' That made no sense unless he was confusing me for someone else. But then I thought about it more, and something cold crawled into my spine. What if I was the guy he meant? What if weeks or months before he had camped in that same spot and seen me there? What if I had been sitting by the fire and he had seen me in the exact same way I saw him? What if I had been the quiet figure by the fire he remembered? But I'd never gone to that area before. I had never met him. I was sure of it. At least, I thought I was. I started digging through other posts. I found a couple more scattered comments on older threads. People describing a strange guy who said things that didn't add up. Things like, "We did this before," or "You always sit on that log." Always in different places, always near isolated camping spots. Each time, the guy would just vanish into the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I had been seen before. Not just this trip, but maybe on one I didn't remember. I went back through my old journal entries, trying to track every trip, every location. It all lined up, except for one gap. One weekend a year prior where I had written, "Camping trip canceled, too much rain." But I couldn't remember if I had actually stayed home. I remembered packing. I remembered preparing. But I didn't remember canceling. Had I gone anyway? Had I gone out there and what? Blacked out? Forgotten it? Had I sat beside someone else's fire without realizing it? Had I been him? I looked at the map, traced the area from that trip, and realized something else. That forum post, the one where the guy mentioned me sitting by the fire, was dated just 3 days after my October trip. The one where I saw him. What if that wasn't the first time? What if I had been there before? What if I had been seen? I stopped reading after that, deleted my account, locked up all my camping gear in the garage and haven't touched it since. I still don't know what happened. I still don't understand it fully. All I know is that I was sure I had seen a stranger at my fire, and now I'm not sure I wasn't his stranger, too. It's one thing to feel watched. It's something else to realize someone thinks you've been there before, even when you don't remember being there. And now, when I try to fall asleep, sometimes I imagine myself sitting beside a fire in the middle of the woods, staring into the flames, totally still. No words, no movement, just watching someone else, thinking they look familiar and not knowing why. And it scares me, because maybe it was me, maybe I was there, and maybe I'll be there again. Living in the city for most of my life, I always looked forward to getting away from the noise, the traffic, and the constant pull of technology. So when my buddy Eric invited me to go camping deep in the Appalachian backcountry, I didn't hesitate. I had some experience hiking and staying outdoors, but this was different. This would be a full 3-day trip, far off the grid, no cell service, no cabins nearby, just nature, tents, and what we could carry on our backs. We left early Friday morning, driving for several hours until paved roads turned to gravel, then gravel turned to dirt. Eventually, we parked the truck on the side of an old logging road and hiked for another few miles until we reached a clearing surrounded by thick forest. It was a perfect spot, flat, close to a shallow creek, and just isolated enough. The first day was peaceful. We set up camp, gathered firewood, and spent the evening roasting hot dogs and watching the stars. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were crickets, the occasional owl, and the soft bubbling of the creek nearby. That night, I slept well. I was exhausted from the hike, and the sleeping bag felt better than I expected. Morning came with mist hovering low over the forest floor. We made instant coffee and oatmeal before heading out for a day hike to a ridge Eric said had a great view. We were gone for most of the day, exploring animal tracks and skirting around a patch of dense brush that Eric said probably housed snakes. When we returned around dusk, I noticed something strange. One of the sticks we had placed to mark the path to our tent had been moved. It was a small thing, probably just fell or got knocked over by a raccoon or something. I didn't mention it. We made another fire and ate dehydrated pasta from a pouch. We stayed up later that night talking about work, life, stuff we missed about being kids. The second night wasn't as peaceful. I kept waking up to sounds. It wasn't animals digging through our stuff. We'd hung our food in a bear bag up in a tree and cleaned up well. It was movement like slow walking in the brush, the kind that makes you freeze, thinking it might be another person. But every time I sat up and listened, it stopped. Eventually, I fell back asleep. The next morning, we both seemed on edge. Neither of us slept well, and Eric mentioned he thought he heard something too. We chalked it up to animals. The forest is full of life. It was nothing. Still, we decided to stay near camp that day. Around midday, we went down to the creek to refill our water bottles using the filter pump. The creek was only about 60 yards from the tent, but you had to go down a slope and through some brush. While Eric was pumping water, I looked up the hill toward our camp. I saw movement. Person, I thought at first, just for a second. But they were gone as soon as I registered it. I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't sure. Could have been a trick of light, a bird, a deer. But it stuck with me. When we got back up to the tent, everything looked the same. Nothing out of place. But I noticed a small pile of stones near a tree about 20 feet from our tent. I didn't remember seeing them before. The stones were neatly stacked, 5 or 6 of them. Again, maybe just a coincidence. Maybe some kid built it weeks ago and it had just held up through weather. But something about it didn't sit right. That afternoon we stayed close, building up a large fire pit and reinforcing the tarp over our cooking area. We didn't talk much. The woods were quiet too quiet in a way. Less birdsong than usual. The feeling of being watched started to creep in. As it got darker, I told Eric I thought I saw someone near the camp earlier. He looked at me, didn't laugh, didn't question it. He just nodded and said he had that feeling too. We decided not to play tough guys. If something didn't feel right, we would pack up early the next morning and hike out. That night, we didn't sleep much. We stayed up by the fire longer, poking at the flames and listening. Just listening. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I heard it again, movement. This time it was clear. Slow crunching steps on dry leaves. Not fast like a deer. Deliberate. Measured. Human. We froze. Neither of us had a gun, just a hatchet and a couple pocket knives. The fire was still going strong. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the edge of the woods. Nothing. Just trees and dark. But the steps stopped. Then nothing. Silence again. We stayed up until dawn. When the first bit of light came through the trees, we packed everything quickly. Faster than I thought we could. No breakfast, just dumped the cold coffee water and rolled up our gear. As we were heading out, I stopped to relieve myself off the side of the trail, maybe a half-mile from camp. That's when I saw it. Another pile of stones. Not like the first one. This one was fresh. The dirt beneath had been disturbed, and the rocks had moss scraped off. This wasn't old. It was new. From last night, maybe even early morning. I didn't say anything until we were back at the truck. I just wanted to get out. We got in, locked the doors, and started driving. Neither of us spoke for most of the drive. When we hit paved road again, the tension eased, and Eric finally looked at me and said, "You saw the rocks too?" I nodded. We didn't say anything else. We didn't go back to that spot again. I still camp, but never that deep, not anymore. I stick to places with other people around. I carry a small sidearm now too. Maybe it was just some hermit living out there. Maybe a hunter. But there was something off about it. It wasn't just the movement or the sounds. It was the feeling that we weren't supposed to be there. Like we crossed some invisible line and someone was letting us know. No violence, no confrontation. Just presence. And I think that's what made it worse. Whoever was out there didn't want to hurt us. They wanted us gone, and they knew how to let us know without saying a word. That kind of silence says more than yelling ever could. And I listened. We both did. We never spoke about it again after that ride home. We didn't need to. When I was a teenager, around 15 or 16, my friend Katie came up with the idea that we should camp out in the woods behind her house for her birthday. It was late summer, maybe early September. The days were still warm, but the nights had started getting cooler, and the air was just beginning to carry that early sign of fall. A little crispness, the smell of dry leaves, that kind of thing. Katie lived on the edge of a small town, and her backyard opened into this thick patch of woods that went on for a ways before it met up with farmland. The forest wasn't particularly huge, but once you got inside it, it felt like you were far away from everything. There were 6 of us total. Katie, me, Rainey, Jess, Amanda, and Olivia. We were all pretty close at that time, that kind of intense teenage closeness that fades as you grow up but feels like the whole world when you're in it. We had planned it for a few weeks, packed sleeping bags, bug spray, snacks, flashlights, and Katie had a decent-sized 4-person tent that we knew we'd have to squeeze into, but that was part of the fun. We hauled everything out into the woods that evening, just as the sun was starting to go down. The walk wasn't long, about 1/8 of a mile in. We followed a trail behind her house, then veered off a little to the right where there was this small, half-clearing surrounded by pine trees. The ground was fairly flat and not too covered in rocks or sticks, so it worked well enough for our campsite. Jess and Amanda helped Katie pitch the tent, and the rest of us gathered sticks and branches for a fire. Katie's dad had helped us load up a little fire pit ring and given us some starter logs and matches. We got the fire going right as the last bit of sunlight faded behind the trees. We were all feeling pretty excited, laughing a lot, talking about school starting soon and who liked who and what drama was going on in other friend groups. The night air was cool, and the fire gave off enough heat that we weren't cold. We roasted marshmallows and made some awkward, half-burnt s'mores, and after we were full of sugar and starting to settle down, Katie suggested we tell ghost stories. It felt like a perfect night for it. The trees around us were tall and close together, and their tops seemed to vanish into the dark sky. The only light we had came from the fire and a few flashlights scattered around. When it got really quiet, you could hear the occasional rustle of leaves or a branch cracking somewhere off in the woods. Nothing too close, but close enough to make your imagination run a little wild. We all took turns telling stories. Some were classic urban legends. A few were actual news stories twisted to sound scarier than they probably were. I tried telling one about this guy who was supposedly found in a cabin with a journal full of drawings of eyes and warnings, but I got too into the details and fumbled the ending. Rainey made fun of me for that, but in a friendly way. She was always like that. No filter, no fear. She could say anything without blinking and would call people out without hesitation. Honestly, I admired her for it, even if she scared me sometimes. It was probably close to midnight when we started running out of stories and began just talking in the tent, huddled together in our sleeping bags. The fire was still going strong outside. Not blazing, but definitely alive. That's when we first heard it. It was soft at first, just a few twigs snapping underfoot. At first, I thought maybe it was Katie's older brother messing with us. He had joked earlier about sneaking out and scaring us, but Katie swore she told him she'd murder him if he tried. We all got quiet, listening hard. The sound came again, slow footsteps moving in a circle around the tent. We didn't see anything at first. The tent was made of this thin nylon material, kind of see-through if there was light behind it. With the fire still glowing outside, the entire tent was faintly illuminated in orange light, and shadows flickered across the fabric as the flames moved. That's when we saw it. A large shadow passed by the side of the tent, just for a second, but big enough that we all froze. Whatever it was tall and solid, not one of us. Kept circling slowly, and then we heard it, a low, soft sniffing, like something was sniffing around the fabric of the tent, curious or trying to figure out what we were. It was methodical, moving from one side to the next, a soft breathing sound accompanying each step. Nobody said anything. I felt my heart start to pound so loud I thought everyone else could hear it. I remember my fingers gripping the edge of my sleeping bag so tight that the nylon crinkled. Someone grabbed my arm. I think it was Olivia. Her nails dug in a little. I tried not to move. I didn't even want to breathe. In my head, I was running through everything I'd ever heard about animal encounters. I knew bears were rare around here, but they weren't impossible. There had been one spotted a few towns over a year or two ago. Coyotes were more common, but this thing didn't move like a coyote. It was heavier, slower. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be like Rainey, who was sitting up now, peering at the side of the tent like she could see through it. But I couldn't help it. I slid down into the middle of the tent, buried myself under the blankets, trying to disappear. My face was hot even though the air was cold. I felt embarrassed and terrified all at once. The sniffing got closer to the entrance of the tent. That was the moment Rainey decided she'd had enough. Without warning, she unzipped the tent and stuck her head outside. The rest of us gasped and tried to pull her back, but she was already halfway out. Then we heard her say, "Oh, for God's sake," in that voice she used when she thought everyone else was being ridiculous. We scrambled to look. Standing just outside the tent was this massive Great Dane, black with a patch of white on his chest. He was taller than any dog I'd ever seen up close. His head was inside the tent now, and his long tongue was licking Rainey's face as she tried to push him off. He wasn't aggressive, just overly friendly and clearly excited to have found people. We all started laughing, not nervous laughter, the real kind, the kind that bursts out when fear turns into something else all at once. The dog wandered into the tent a little, sniffing our sleeping bags and stepping on everything. He was panting, tail wagging, tongue flopping all over the place. Turns out, he belonged to the neighbors who lived in the house right next to Katie's. He must have gotten out, wandered into the woods, and followed the sound of our voices and the smell of the fire. Katie recognized him and even knew his name, Bobo the Great Dane. We let him hang out with us the rest of the night. He curled up near the fire for a while, then moved inside the tent with us. It was cramped already, and having 100-and-something-pound dog sprawled across our legs didn't help, but none of us cared. Felt safer somehow with him there. The next morning, we packed up and walked back to the house with Bo leading the way. We called the neighbors from Katie's kitchen, and they came over to get him. They were relieved and grateful, and Bo seemed happy enough to go home, though he looked back at us like he wouldn't have minded staying. Everyone teased me for hiding under the blankets. Rainey especially wouldn't let it go. She told everyone at school, too, and for a while it became a kind of inside joke. But honestly, I didn't mind. It was scary. It felt real in the moment. And now, thinking back on it, I remember that fear, but I also remember the laughter, the firelight, the way the tent smelled like pine needles and smoke. That night stuck with me, not because of some ghost or monster, but because it was one of those moments when you realize how fear works, how your mind fills in the dark with all the worst things it can imagine, and how sometimes the thing that scares you turns out to just be a dog looking for company. It was the last time I ever went camping in those woods, not because of what happened, but because we all started to drift apart after that year. Different classes, new interests, relationships, the way teenagers grow up and move on. But I think about that night more often than I thought I would. And yeah, even now, I can still feel the heat of that fire, the weight of that dog stepping on my feet, and the thudding of my own heart when the shadow first appeared. Some memories don't fade, no matter how old you get. The moment my boots hit the trail that morning, I already had a weird feeling in my gut. Not fear exactly, but something quieter, tension maybe, a low buzz under the surface, the kind you can ignore but never really forget about. I told myself it was just nerves from being solo again. That happens sometimes, even after years of backcountry trips. I don't think it ever fully goes away. This trip was supposed to be a short one, 3 nights, maybe 4 if the weather held up. I had mapped out a loop through a lesser-traveled area I hadn't been to before, remote enough to be quiet, but not so far out that I couldn't bail if something went wrong. I had my usual gear packed tight, checked twice. Tent, food, filter, stove, bear spray, first aid, emergency blanket, signal mirror, all the boring stuff that you pack hoping you'll never need. The first day went fine. Mostly flat terrain, a few river crossings, lots of dense woods. I passed one older couple about 4 miles in, going the opposite direction. We nodded, didn't speak. After that, I didn't see another soul. Around 5 p.m., I found a clearing just off the main trail, tucked about 30 feet from a creek, flat enough for my tent, with a few downed logs to sit on and cook. I set up camp, boiled some water, and ate one of those freeze-dried pasta meals that always taste better when you're tired and hungry. It got dark fast. I cleaned up, stored my food bag up a tree a good distance from the tent, and crawled in for the night. That first night in the tent is always strange. Takes a little while to stop noticing every tiny sound. Trees groaning in the wind, water moving over stones, the distant hoot of an owl or maybe a coyote call far off. You lie there in that little cocoon of nylon and mesh, fully aware that there's just fabric between you and the whole forest. But after a while, your body gives in to the exhaustion, and your brain dulls, and sleep comes whether you want it or not. That wasn't the night. The second night was. The day had gone smoothly again. A long hike through more uneven ground, roots, rocks, a couple steep sections that tested my knees. I sweated hard and drank more than usual. The air felt heavier than it had the day before. Not hot, just close, like a storm was trying to build but hadn't committed yet. I made it to the ridge I'd planned to camp near, which had a great overlook of a small valley and a wide stream below. I found a flat area with sparse trees, perfect for the tent, and a few large boulders nearby where I could sit and cook. I did the usual routine. Tent up, food hung, dinner down, water filtered. I didn't feel quite right, though. My stomach was off and I had a low, nagging headache that wouldn't fully settle. I chalked it up to dehydration and maybe not enough salt. I forced myself to drink more and take a few electrolyte tablets. As night fell, the feeling got worse. It wasn't a sharp pain, just a vague discomfort that I couldn't pin down. It wasn't just in my body, it was in my head too. That sense again, that low buzz from the first day, but louder now. I kept telling myself it was all in my mind, that I'd had moments like this before and nothing had ever come of them. You get paranoid when you're alone in the woods long enough. Your brain starts making shapes in the dark. Still, I couldn't relax. I lay in the tent, listening to everything. The ridge was quiet, too quiet, honestly. I realized suddenly how little wildlife I'd seen that day.
No deer, no squirrels.
Not even birds. And now that I was thinking about it, I couldn't remember hearing any insects either. Just the wind moving gently through the trees, like a low whisper. Then, close to midnight, I heard it. First, I thought it was wind again, but it was more rhythmic than that. Pattern. A sound that came and went. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Not fast, but steady. Moving across the ridge somewhere above me. My whole body locked up. I sat up in the tent and shut off my headlamp. I didn't want to draw attention. I couldn't tell how far away the steps were. Maybe 30 feet, maybe 50, but they were real. That wasn't a squirrel or a fox. It wasn't random noise. Something or someone was walking the ridge above my tent, just out of sight. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe hard. I just sat there, heart pounding, listening. Then the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. That's when I heard the second sound. A low scrape like metal on stone. Faint but real. Maybe it was something natural. Maybe not. It only happened once. But it sent a different kind of fear into my chest. Cold and sharp. Not the jump scare kind, something deeper. The kind of fear that makes your mouth go dry. I waited for what felt like an hour, though it was probably just minutes. Then more movement, this time down the slope behind the tent. Slower now, less rhythmic. A few steps, then a pause. Then silence again. I waited until the sounds were gone, really gone, before I dared to move. I reached for my bear spray and unzipped the tent just enough to poke my head out. Total darkness.
No mon.
My eyes adjusted slowly. Trees stood like black pillars around me. I scanned the ridge, the slope, the space near the food bag. Nothing moved. I sat like that for nearly 2 hours, just watching. Eventually, the chill set in, and the adrenaline started to wear off. I crawled back into the tent and stayed fully clothed, bear spray in hand. I didn't sleep. Not really. I just closed my eyes and waited for morning. When light finally returned, I got up and walked the area. I half expected to find boot prints, but the ground was too dry, too hard. I checked near the boulders down the slope. Nothing obvious, but something had been there. I knew it. I could still feel it in my bones. I packed up fast. Didn't even make coffee. Just shoved everything in my pack, yanked the food bag down, and got moving. I didn't look back. I took a different trail out, even though it was longer. I kept checking behind me every 10 minutes, convinced I'd see someone, or something, following me through the trees. But the woods stayed empty.
No birds.
No bugs. No sounds but my own boots. By late afternoon, I hit the road near a small logging area and waited until a pickup came by and gave me a lift back to the main park entrance. I didn't say much. The driver didn't ask. That night, I got a room in a cheap roadside motel and slept with the lights on. I've been back out since then, many times. Different parks, different trails. But I never went back to that ridge. I've studied maps of the area, looking for an explanation. Maybe it was just another hiker, someone cutting across off-trail and unaware of my camp. Maybe it was a large animal with an oddly human gait. I've told myself every version of that story I can think of, trying to make it make sense. And the thing is, I didn't die. Thanks for the clarification. But I think sometimes it's not about whether you make it out. It's about how close you came, how small the margin is between a good trip and a story you never get to tell. I didn't die, but I know now how easy it could have been. It's strange what sticks with you. I've heard a lot of creepy stories, but there's one from years ago that still messes with my head sometimes. I don't think about it often. Most days, I keep it buried like some old file in the back of a drawer. But every now and then, something brings it up. A noise at night, a random camping thread online, and I'm back there again. That trip, that feeling, that moment where everything went from peaceful to wrong in a blink. This was years ago, probably around 2014. I had just gone through a rough patch, work stress, a breakup, just one of those long stretches where everything feels like it's grinding against you. I needed to get out of the city for a while. I wasn't looking for company or anything organized. I wanted the opposite: silence, space. So I planned a solo camping trip up north, near the edge of some state-owned forest land where foot traffic was light, especially that time of year. I picked a spot I'd seen in an old forum thread. Not an official campground, more like a backwoods site that some hikers had marked out over time. It was about a 4-hour drive from where I lived, with the last stretch on gravel roads that didn't even have real names, just letters and numbers painted on wooden stakes. The weather was decent, cold at night, but clear skies and no wind. Perfect for solitude. I packed light but smart. Tent, sleeping bag, fire tools, knife, bear spray, food for 3 days, and a small shovel. No need for luxuries. I liked roughing it. Made me feel cleaner, sharper. I didn't even bring a book. I just wanted to sit with my own thoughts. The hike in wasn't too bad. Maybe 2.5 miles from where I parked my truck. The trees were thick, pine and birch mostly, with underbrush thinned out from the colder weather. I only saw one other person's tracks on the trail, old boot prints in dry mud that led the opposite way from where I was headed. I remember thinking how alone I really was out there. Not in a scary way, just that realization that no one was around to hear or see you. Some people find that freeing. I did too at first. The clearing I picked was perfect. Flat ground, surrounded on 3 sides by trees, and the 4th side opened up to a rocky drop-off that overlooked a shallow ravine. A small stream ran through the bottom. You could hear the water if you stood still. There was no cell signal, no nearby cabins, not even the hum of distant roads. Just wind and trees and that soft rushing water down below. I set up camp around mid-afternoon. Tent staked tight, sleeping pad unrolled, fire pit cleared and ringed with rocks. I boiled water and made some instant noodles, sat on a stump, sipping from my metal cup, and let the quiet soak in. It was good. The kind of good you forget exists when you live surrounded by machines and schedules. That first night was uneventful. I remember lying in my sleeping bag, staring at the dark roof of the tent, hearing nothing but the forest shifting outside, branches creaking, leaves fluttering, the occasional crack of something falling. It was cold, and I tucked my arms tight against my chest. I've always had this thing about not letting limbs hang out of the bed, or in this case, the bag. It's stupid, but I can't help it. I get this creeping feeling, like something's watching, waiting for skin to touch the air. I woke up a few times from the cold, but I was never really scared that first night. Just alert. The kind of alert you get when your instincts are running, but there's nothing specific to point at. The second day, I stayed close to camp. I walked the ridge a bit, followed the slope down toward the stream. There was a point where the rocks formed a natural little seat, and I sat there for a while, watching the water. Ate a granola bar, checked the angle of the sun, then climbed back up before it started getting too late. I didn't want to be clambering up those rocks in low light. That afternoon, while I was stacking wood for the evening fire, I noticed something weird about the dirt near the edge of the clearing. It looked disturbed, like someone had stepped there recently. I crouched down and saw a partial boot print. Not mine, unless I had somehow walked there without noticing. But I didn't think I had. The soil was soft, and the print looked newer than anything else. I poked around a bit, looked for more, but didn't see anything definite. I told myself it was probably mine from the day before, maybe during setup. No big deal. Still, I couldn't quite shake the feeling that it wasn't. That night, I made a larger fire, just for comfort. The flames felt like company. I sat there for a long time, watching the stars blink out between the trees as the smoke curled up into the sky. I didn't feel scared exactly, but something was bothering me. Something small. A feeling I couldn't pin down. You know how a room can feel off even when nothing's wrong? It was like that, like the woods had gotten too quiet. Eventually, I put the fire out and zipped myself into the tent. I wrapped the sleeping bag tight, arms and legs tucked in, and tried to fall asleep. I don't know what time it was when I heard the sound. It was soft, not breaking branches or crashing through the brush, just the faintest scuffle, like dirt shifting under a foot. I held my breath and waited. Nothing, just silence. Then, a few minutes later, I heard it again. Closer, a scrape, a dry rustle, not loud but deliberate. I thought about animals, a raccoon maybe, or a fox, but it didn't feel like that. I've been around animals. They move differently. This wasn't that. I didn't move. I kept still inside the bag, arms crossed over my chest, every inch of me covered. I stared at the roof of the tent, barely breathing. Then something touched the fabric. Just a tap, like a single finger pressed against the side near my legs. Then it slid, slowly, along the tent wall. It stopped. I stayed completely still. I was sweating despite the cold. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then nothing. No more sounds. No more movement. Whatever it was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the first light broke through the trees, I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and stepped outside. Everything looked the same. No footprints, no marks, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. Something or someone had been there. I packed up my gear fast, thinking about hiking back to the truck early. But part of me didn't want to feel like I was running. I convinced myself to stay one more night, but I moved the tent to a different spot, deeper into the trees with a better view of the approach trail. I also cleared the brush in a wide circle around the tent so I'd hear anyone or anything trying to walk up. I barely ate that day, just nibbled at some jerky and drank water. I kept listening, scanning, waiting. I didn't build a fire that night. I didn't want to draw attention. As darkness settled, I sat in the tent, wide awake. I didn't even get in the sleeping bag. Just sat there with my knife in one hand and the bear spray in the other. I left the bag unzipped so I could move fast. It was dead quiet for hours. So quiet I started to think maybe it really was an animal. Maybe I'd worked myself up too much. Then I heard the breathing. It was faint, just outside the tent wall. A soft exhale, then another. Not like someone out of breath, just steady, calm. It was the kind of sound you don't notice until everything else is completely still. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I was too scared. The breathing lasted for maybe 30 seconds. Then it stopped. A few moments later, I heard slow footsteps backing away into the woods. I stayed frozen until daylight. When I finally opened the tent, I saw them. Footprints. Actual footprints. Human. Barefoot. They circled the tent. Not just once, multiple loops. Closed too. A few inches from where I'd been sitting all night. I looked around, heart pounding, and saw something else a few feet away. A sock. Just one. Dirty. Worn. Stuffed with small stones. I left. Fast. I didn't pack properly. I just shoved everything into the bag and hiked out, running half the time. I don't know how I made it back to the truck so fast. My legs were rubber by the time I saw the road. The truck door slammed shut behind me, and I locked it without thinking. I drove for 20 minutes before I even looked back. I never reported it. What would I say? Someone watched me sleep? There was no crime, technically, just this awful presence. Like being studied, tasted, measured. Even now, years later, I keep thinking about how close they got. About how they didn't do anything except watch and breathe and wait. And the worst part? They knew I was awake. They knew. That's why I don't let my arms or legs dangle off the bed anymore. Not because of some story about a monster or a ghost. Because I've felt what it's like to be that vulnerable. To have someone right there, just inches away, doing nothing but listening to you breathe in the dark. And wondering if this time, maybe, they'll do more than just watch. I used to spend a lot of time alone. Not because I didn't have people in my life. I had friends, a job, even a girlfriend at one point. But there was something about being completely out in the woods, no phone, no voices, no lights, that made me feel more like myself. I didn't post about it. Didn't bring people with me. I didn't do it to show off. It was the only thing that made me feel like I could breathe. This happened to me a few years ago. I was in a different place back then, mentally, a little bitter, pretty burned out, and just trying to hold my life together. I had gotten laid off from a job I hated, was behind on rent, and had a falling out with one of the few close friends I had. I was living in a small, run-down apartment, barely able to afford groceries, let alone therapy. So I did what I always did when things felt too big. I grabbed my gear and disappeared for a while. The spot I picked was one I had found back in college. A long-forgotten game trail off a dirt road in the hills north of town. You had to hike in about 4 or 5 miles, and it crossed some sketchy terrain, but the reward was a perfect clearing, flat, quiet, and hidden by thick pine and fir. No tourists, no noise. You could scream out there and no one would hear you. I loaded up my pack with everything I'd need for 4 days. Tent, bag, tarp, stove, food, water filter, maps, all the basics. I left early on a Wednesday morning and parked in the usual gravel turnout off the old service road. Nobody was there. It was a cloudy spring day, chilly but not cold, and the air smelled sharp with pine needles and wet bark. I remember thinking it was exactly what I needed. The hike in was harder than I remembered. My pack felt heavier, and the trail had washed out in a few places from the winter melt. I had to climb over a couple of downed trees and wade through a shallow runoff that had taken over part of the trail. But I got there by late afternoon. Same clearing, same silence. It felt like stepping into a part of my old self that I hadn't touched in years. I set up fast. Tent under the trees, food bag hanging from a limb, and a little pile of wood stacked for a fire if I wanted it. I didn't light one that night. I ate a cold pouch of rice and beans, drank from the creek, and crawled into the tent before the light even faded. I was out almost immediately, the kind of sleep that only comes when your mind finally lets go. The first day was uneventful. I woke up to birds, wandered a little, sat on a rock, wrote in a notebook. Nothing deep, just idle thoughts, dumb jokes to myself, memories. I remember watching a pair of hawks circle overhead for almost half an hour, just turning in slow, lazy arcs above the tree line. Felt timeless. That night, something shifted. I didn't hear anything right away. It was more like I felt something. You know that weird sensation when the atmosphere seems to go flat? Like the world has gone mute, but you can't explain why? That's what it was. I was lying in the tent, not asleep but drifting, when I realized I couldn't hear anything. No bugs, no water, not even wind in the branches. Then I heard what I thought was a stick snapping. Not loud, not close, just sharp enough to pull my thoughts back into the tent. I didn't move. I didn't panic. I've heard branches fall before, squirrels drop things, animals step on stuff. But this wasn't like that. This had a rhythm to it. Another snap, then a pause, then another, almost like footsteps but not regular. Slow, then faster. A crunch, a pause, two more. It moved in a circle around the clearing. Far out at first, then closer. I stayed dead still in the bag, headlamp in my hand but turned off. Whatever it was, it stayed out of sight. No breathing, no lights, just those irregular steps dragging slightly in the leaves. Then it stopped, just stopped. I waited, counted to 30, then to 60, still nothing. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew it was morning and the world sounded normal again. Birds, wind, distant trickle of the creek. I stepped outside, slow and cautious, scanning the edge of the clearing. Nothing looked out of place. I walked the perimeter. No tracks, no marks, but the feeling stuck with me. I should have left then. I know that now, but I told myself it was nothing. My mind playing tricks. A raccoon, maybe a deer, something small. I went about my morning like usual. Filtered water, boiled oatmeal, wrote in the notebook. But I noticed something that didn't feel right. The food bag I had hung was lower. Not a lot, maybe a foot. But I tie those bags carefully, always the same way. Double knots, hung high and tight from a thick branch. This one was sagging slightly, like someone had tugged on the rope and then let go. I checked the bag. Nothing missing. Still sealed. But I couldn't shake it. That afternoon, I took a short hike about a mile east to check on an old logging road I remembered from years ago. I wanted to see if it was still there, maybe as a backup exit if I needed to bail. The road was there, mostly overgrown, and it did lead back to the main Forest Service loop. I made a note of it and turned back. When I got back to camp, I knew something was wrong. There was a boot print in the soft dirt near my tent. It wasn't mine. Too big, too wide, with a worn, smooth heel. Like a work boot, maybe. I wear lightweight hikers, different tread completely, and this print was fresh. I knelt beside it, trying to measure how deep it was, trying to think through every possibility. Could someone have followed me in? Had they been watching the whole time? I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the tent, heart pounding, knife clutched in my fist, just listening. Nothing moved, no sounds, no footsteps, but I knew someone had been there. I was sure of it. In the morning, I packed everything. I didn't make breakfast, didn't refill water, just loaded up and started walking. I took the logging road out. It added miles, but I didn't care. I moved fast, kept checking behind me. I even pulled out the small mirror I carried to scan behind turns. No sign of anyone. The deeper I got into the woods, the more I started to feel like I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the print had been older than I thought. Maybe I had missed it before. Maybe the food bag had just sagged from moisture. Maybe. But then I found the camera. It was an old trail cam, strapped to a tree about 7 feet up, half hidden behind a thick vine. Not the kind hunters use. This one was more compact. Black casing, no logos. Looked newer. I only saw it because I stopped to retie my boot. It was aimed right at the trail, and I hadn't put it there. I didn't touch it. I didn't even stop to examine it. I just stood up and kept moving, faster this time. I felt sick, like my stomach had dropped into my knees. That meant someone else had been out there. Not a week ago, not a year ago, recently, and not by accident. They had mounted a camera, aimed it at a hidden trail, and left it, which meant they probably knew someone would be walking by. Probably me. I reached the service road by late afternoon. My car was there, alone, but something felt off. The doors were locked, the windows unbroken, nothing obvious, but I saw the scratch on the hood. Just one, about 10 inches long, deep, like someone had dragged a key or a knife across it, from the front edge toward the windshield. I ran my fingers over it. It was fresh. I got in and drove straight home. I didn't stop. Not for gas. Not for food. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just got home. locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back to it for a long time. A few weeks later, I was cleaning out my pack and found something I didn't put there. It was a Polaroid photo, folded in half, tucked between my map and a backup emergency blanket. The photo was blurry, black and white, but it showed a man, mid-30s maybe, standing in a clearing that looked a lot like mine. He was wearing a jacket, pants, boots. No face visible, just the outline. The trees behind him were the same kind of pine. Same slope, same moss-covered log I'd sat on. I don't know how it got in there. I don't know who took it or when, but I haven't been camping since. People always say, "Why didn't you go to the police?" But what would I say? Someone scratched my car. Someone maybe followed me? Someone left a photo in my pack? There were no names, no faces, no proof, just little signs, little things meant to get in my head. And they did. Every once in a while, I think about that comment people always make. Don't you mean a few years ago? Like time makes it feel safer, more distant, like if it didn't happen yesterday, it can't still matter. But I know how close I came to something I still can't explain. Something that wasn't a ghost or a monster or a dream, just a person. And the scariest thing in the woods isn't what you don't believe in. It's what's out there watching, quiet, patient, real, waiting. We'd been going camping in Kearney, Ontario every summer for years. Same spot every time, deep in the woods near a lake, about a 30-minute drive from the closest town and maybe a 10-minute walk from where the dirt road ends. There's a clearing we always use, flat enough for tents, surrounded by trees, with just enough of a view of the stars at night when the sky opens up above us. It's tradition now, something we all look forward to as a break from our jobs, our routines, the noise of city life. It's where we can let loose for a few days and just forget about everything. We always set up our tents in a big circle, like a little village with the fire pit in the center. Each year, we'd fall into the same pattern without even needing to plan it. Someone brings the firewood, someone brings the food, someone brings the beer. And there's always weed, sometimes shrooms. It's that kind of trip. We go up there to get a little wild, to laugh too much, to stare at the flames and feel like the world is smaller and simpler. That year, things felt normal at first. There were 8 of us in total, a couple of cars packed with gear and coolers and folding chairs. We arrived just before sunset, got the fire going, tents up, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, and we cracked open the first round of beers. The air had that fresh forest smell, pine, smoke, and earth. It was still warm enough to sit around in hoodies, the bugs weren't too bad, and the stars were already coming out. Everything felt right. We'd been drinking for a couple of hours, maybe more, and the shrooms were starting to kick in for some of us. I wasn't fully gone, but I was riding the edge of it. That floaty, slightly unreal feeling where your thoughts start drifting and the fire almost seems alive. A few people were just giggling quietly, staring at the sparks. It was one of those perfect first nights where you forget your phone exists and just feel like you're in another world. That's when he showed up. He just kind of walked into the circle like it was the most normal thing in the world. We didn't hear him coming. One moment it was just us, and then there he was, standing near the fire like he belonged there. He looked maybe mid-30s, average build, wearing a dark hoodie and cargo pants. Nothing special about him, not too tall, not too short, not dirty but not freshly clean either. Just average. He had a small backpack and a rolled-up sleeping pad under one arm. He smiled and said something, introduced himself. I don't remember the name he gave. It slipped out of my mind almost immediately. He said he was on vacation, used to be in the military, just out here to relax. Normally that would raise a few questions, but we weren't in the headspace to question much. Everyone was feeling good, a little too relaxed to care. He said he didn't bring firewood and asked if he could sit by our fire for a bit since it was getting cold. Someone handed him a beer. He dropped a couple bucks into the firewood fun jar we always have out on the table. It wasn't unusual, really. We'd had people from nearby sites stop by before to chat or share a drink. Camping folks can be friendly. He sat down on a log near the fire and just sort of blended in. Didn't say too much. He laughed at a few jokes, passed a joint when it came around, stared into the fire with us. After a while, I stopped even thinking about him. He was just the random, and we all accepted that. One by one, people started heading off to their tents. The buzz was wearing off, the cold was creeping in, and our voices got quieter. I was maybe the second or third person to go to bed. I remember unzipping my sleeping bag, curling up, and still hearing the fire crackling as I drifted off. The air was cool and damp, and the sounds of the forest filled the space between breaths. An owl somewhere, the distant splash of water, the low mumble of the last few people talking. Then I woke up. I didn't know what time it was at first. My head was still fuzzy, and my mouth was dry, but I could see the faint flicker of light through the fabric of my tent. I sat up slowly, still kind of stuck in the space between dreaming and waking. My brain felt soft, like it hadn't fully booted up yet. I listened. There was a voice outside, low, quiet, and constant. Someone talking. I unzipped my tent just enough to peek out. The fire was lit again, not big, but steady. And he was sitting there, the random guy, alone. He was hunched forward, elbows on knees, facing the flames. His mouth was moving, he was talking to himself. Not whispering, but not loud either. Just talking. His tone never changed, like it wasn't a story or a joke. It sounded like a monologue, or maybe a list, or maybe like he was reciting something. I couldn't make out the words. My stomach dropped a little, but I told myself I was still tripping, that it was just the shrooms playing games with me. The firelight made the shadows jump, and the trees around the site looked too tall, too narrow, like they were leaning in. I lay back down, zipped the tent up, and told myself I was imagining it, that he was probably just high too, or weird, or both. I didn't want to be the one to get up and check. I didn't want to interact. Eventually, I fell asleep again. In the morning, everything looked normal. The fire was down to embers, smoke rising lazily in the morning light. Birds were singing. I unzipped my tent and stepped out, yawning and stretching like nothing happened. One by one, people emerged, sleepy and disheveled. Someone started the camp stove for coffee. Someone else dug around in the cooler for eggs. No one mentioned him at first, but his tent, the one he said he set up at the next site over, was gone. The spot where he said he was staying was empty, like really empty. No tent, no sleeping pad, no backpack, no garbage, no footprints, no signs anyone had ever been there. That's when people started talking about it. Quietly at first, just kind of testing the memory. Like, did he leave? Or did anyone see him this morning? And then it turned into, what time did you go to bed? And what time did you wake up? That's how we pieced it together. The last two in our group had passed out around 3:30 a.m., still sitting by the fire with him. The first person to get up, always the early riser, stepped out of their tent a little after 6 a.m. He was already gone by then. No sound of footsteps, no crackling leaves, no snapping branches, just gone. We all remembered him, but something about the memory felt thin, like it was already fading. No one had taken any photos. We didn't have a name. All we had was that weird few hours where he just appeared, sat with us, and disappeared. The rest of the trip went on without incident. We didn't talk about it much after that morning. We laughed, we drank, we swam in the lake. No one else showed up. No other strange visitors. We packed up at the end of the weekend, left the site as clean as we found it, and drove home. Life went on. Then, years later, 4 or maybe 5, I was sitting at home flipping through channels when I saw something that made my skin crawl. The local news had a segment about a man arrested for multiple crimes. Serious ones. Assault, rape, murder. The screen showed a photo of him, grainy and low quality, maybe from a driver's license or old mugshot. But I recognized him instantly. I can't explain it, but it was like something in my brain just snapped into place. I remembered the firelight on his face, the way he sat hunched forward, his eyes reflecting the flames, the way he talked to himself when he thought no one was watching. I remembered every detail of that moment, crystal clear, like my memory had taken a screenshot. There was no mistaking it. It was him. I sat there for a long time after that, just staring at the screen, trying to piece it together, trying to decide if it really was the same person or just someone who looked like him. But I knew. I felt it in my gut. I don't have proof. I can't show you a photo. I can't tell you his name because I don't remember what he said that night, and I didn't write it down. Maybe my brain blocked it out. Maybe I didn't want to know. But I know what I saw. I know how it felt. That sinking feeling in my stomach when I saw him alone by the fire, talking to himself like no one else was there. It still gives me chills. Sometimes I think about what could have happened if things had gone differently. If someone had stayed up later. If someone had gotten into an argument with him. If someone had gotten separated in the woods. We were high, drunk, scattered, and vulnerable. Anything could have happened. But nothing did. We all made it home. We all went on with our lives. But that weekend is burned into my memory in a way no other camping trip ever has been. It made me more cautious, more aware. I don't trust strangers around a fire the way I used to, and I don't take those late-night feelings lightly anymore. Sometimes, when we talk about that trip, we laugh it off. We call him the random, like he was just some oddball who passed through. But I know what I saw, and I know we were lucky, really lucky.